Let's bring in former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree. Good to see you, Tom. So you heard the president there. Does he have a point?
Look, I think a lot of the criticism that we've heard, Sandra, frankly, I have a high tolerance for hypocrisy in Washington, D.C., but this is a little much. The same people who are criticizing the Bolton raid were totally silent when the Democrats were doing the same type of thing to Republicans. Look, the rule of law in the United States means that you need to apply the law fairly and equally. You punish people for what they did, not for things they said or who they are. And so a lot of the brouhaha surrounding the Bolton raid, I think the critics would have a lot more credibility if they had been out making these same points several years ago.
Really interesting. The Washington Post takes this on in an editorial. When the rule of law becomes rule of lawfare, says both sides are to blame. Those who believe in the value of neutral institutions must do everything they can now to protect the rule of law. And I'm afraid that doesn't mean condemning just Trump. It also requires us to condemn Democrats who have violated norms of institutional neutrality in their zeal to get Trump. So, I mean, who is here to blame? Why is this happening?
Well, look, and I think that's a very fair point. I mean, the fact is that we had a world several years ago where the people in power were seeking to execute their political goals through the legal process. That's not right. Now, people are saying, well, the tables have turned and the shoe is on the other foot and the Republicans are doing what the Democrats did. And look, we'll find out ultimately what the basis for the search warrant was, whether it really was retribution or whether there was an actual basis for it. But I think the people that we are hearing screaming the loudest right now, in many cases, were the very people who were silent when the rule of law was on the line several years ago. So to the point of that Washington Post article, I think both sides bear some blame for where we are. And I think everyone could stand to look at their conduct and make sure that they're being consistent, regardless of which party is in power.
But that is not stopping some folks like Adam Schiff to say this on the Bolton raid. Listen.
I think this is clearly retribution. I mean, the idea that they just picked John Bolton, a prominent critic of the president, at random. What the president is trying to do here is very systemic and systematic, and that is anyone who stands up to the president, anyone who criticizes the president, anyone who says anything adverse to the president's interests gets the full weight of the federal government brought down on them.
Reaction to that, Tom?
Well, I think at this point it is too early to know whether or not this was a retributive act by the Trump Justice Department. They went to a court, as they follow the process as they're required to do, and ask a judge to sign off on these search warrants. In order to get the judge's signature on those warrants, they had to provide a basis, usually a sworn affidavit by someone in the FBI or someone in law enforcement, saying that a search is likely to result in the discovery of information that could lead to prosecution for a crime. So I think that they are following the process. We don't know at this point what the basis for the search was. So I think Congressman Schiff is totally premature when he's saying that this is retribution. We just don't know enough at this point for what led the Justice Department to make the decision that they did.
Well, Chris Christie also weighed in. He commented on the FBI search of John Bolton's home, and that drew a very public rebuke from President Trump, who said this on Chris Christie earlier today.
When I listened to Chris speak his hate, I say, oh, what about the George Washington Bridge? You know, tell me about the George Washington Bridge. He blamed other people, but he knew all about it. So no, I don't know if they want to look at it. It's not for me. If they want to look at it, they can. You could ask Pam. I think we have other things to do, but I always thought he got away with murder.
Was that a suggestion from President Trump that they may reopen the Bridgegate investigation, Tom?
Well, I think it was a pretty thinly veiled message. Look, the president has made clear that when he gets hit, he tries to hit back. And although it does not appear at this point that he's directing the activities of the Justice Department in terms of ordering specific raids, I don't think they would be doing it without his approval. And so when he says things like that, I do think it is properly interpreted as a thinly veiled message to say that, look, there are people out there who have been critical of this administration, and the Justice Department may well look into whether or not there is possible criminal activity. I think that's the pretty clear import of what the president was saying there.
All right, Tom Dupree, always good to get you on. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.